I'm Nancy Schilt. I'm president, and I was a delegate at Assembly with Allison. My first General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association was several years ago in Portland, Oregon. I don't know why I never went before that. I don't remember our church reporting back on past assemblies, but they must have. I don't remember anyone especially suggesting how inspiring these gatherings are. So I'm saying now, if at all possible, go to a General Assembly. Next year, it's in Kansas City, Missouri. I don't know what that's going to look like. At least that's the plan at the moment. The year after that is in Spokane, Washington. So start saving up, or if at all possible, and help sponsor someone else from our church to go. It's so good to know we have support of thousands that share our values and connect us to the religion that the world needs and many are searching for. Now is the time when people need to be reminded of goodness, hope, and the broad call for justice. Now more than ever, people need to be able to lean into the strength and vision of our faith to find their balance and build their hope so that they can move. It was so emotional to go and get that hope from everybody there. For me, attending GA was such a life-changing, passionate embodiment of my 30-plus years as a UU in Honolulu. Some of the workshops that were very difficult to decide which to go to, but some of them are...
Interracial families resisting racial microaggressions. Sing truth to power. Resist, rejoice, your voice. Throw racial justice for white folks. An emergency, climate change and environmental justice.
Since Allison and I were delegates to the Assembly, I'll share a bit about the governance of it that we went to, since no one else was a delegate there. We saw bylaws. It was even interesting to see bylaws, believe it or not, how they changed. And I felt really much better about our meetings here. We voted for our new president, and Susan Frederick Gray is our new UU president. And you can hear her speak at our website, at the UUA website. I encourage everyone to see and look at some of the speakers that you can attend GA remotely anytime you want. So the process of changing bylaws, like the eighth principle, they first go to a study task force for a year or so. When the change is ready to be voted on, the delegates present or online can speak at one of three microphones. One is procedure, pro, and con. And the procedure line tended to be longer than the pro and con. But after the time of 15 minutes, pro and con, they voted. And it was amazing. We just held up cards, and there must have been a computer scan or something, because there were like almost 1,000 cards held up, pro or con, and within 20 seconds they had the count. So it was magical. Most of us who attended GA were supported with some kind of scholarship from the UU organization. And because our church gives our fair share to support the broader organization, there was quite a lot given to support us there. Each of you, as members of the congregation, part of your pledge, about approximately $100 of it, goes to the UUA and our Pacific Central District. And for your information, our Pacific Central District leader, Jan Christian, will be here the third weekend in November and be speaking. Thank you.
It's just gathering music. Sunday morning.
As usual, I have a bunch of books for people. That's the biggest thing for me. This book, The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. Okay? This book, The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. the value of the enslaved from womb to grave in the building of a nation. Born on Third Base. This book was by Chuck Collins, who happened to have been one of those people. His great-grandfather was the heir to the Oscar Mayer Wiener Foundation. He gave away his millions of dollars. I've known him for years. And this book, of Labor's Untold Story, which leads us exactly into what we need to talk about in terms of racism and economic justice. You see, in polite circles, we don't usually like to talk about race. But you see, race and class have very deep economic ties. Jay Gould, who was an industrialist back in the 1800s, once said he didn't worry about the poor getting together because he could always hire one half of the poor to kill the other half. For the same reason, we don't think about what's going on and how we are so divided. We don't talk about it because that would divide us. But we are already divided by conservatism, which has taught us to be afraid of other people. For the last 40 years, we have been conditioned by talk radio and television and conservative press to fear other people. So when we talk about what we call dog whistles, we don't talk about racism directly. They'll say things like illegal aliens, makers and takers, welfare queens, entitlements, freeloaders, people who want free stuff, inner city crime, drug tests, welfare recipients. And so what color do we think of when we think of those things? Brown, black, other than ourselves. So when we talk about terms like the silent majority, the heartland, real Americans, hard-working taxpayers, what color faces come to mind? So conservatism uses these words and implicit racism as a way to gain votes. Lee Atwater, a Reagan strategist, once said that politicians could no longer use overt racism appeals because they would backfire. So they started talking about things like states' rights, forced busing, and more abstract terms like cutting taxes. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, because it's all designed to make Americans side with the preferences of the 1% by tying fear of people of color to our very idea of government. Because according to conservative media, government is the problem. Leave it to the marketplace, which creates vast economic inequality, and it's sold by appeals to racial and class resentment. Racism is a belief in the hierarchy of human value, that some people are worth more than others. Everything that we progressives want, reigning in Wall Street, building infrastructure, free colleges, clean environment, all of this depends on having government on our side. But we have been led to believe that the government is our enemy. Race is what makes us, in the 99%, distrust and fight one another, resent government, and turn over control to the very rich. Some think that if we can solve racial equality, economic equality, then racism will go away. Actually, it's quite the opposite. We have to do away with racism, and then we will find economic equality. When we realize that we are all in the same boat. I'm a part of the UUs for a Just Economic Community. Once again, I went to this GA, and I found myself elected to the board of that. And so that happens all the time. And so that's why I'm very passionate about that whole topic. And I'd love to talk more about that someday. If you'll take my workshops, we'll talk about it. Aloha.
Aloha and good morning, everybody. I had no idea that there were so many UUs in the world. I did not know what to expect from General Assembly. I've never been to one. This was my first. And it was quite an experience to realize that there are thousands of us across the nation. And in youth alone, there's hundreds of us. And we were all gathered together in the youth caucus room, and it was electrifying to be around other kids your age who feel the same way about you do about the world. And to just be in New Orleans, such an electrifying city, in an electrifying event was quite an experience. The youth caucus runs itself, basically. We don't need adult help, and we're very proud of it. We run our own services and we have our own meetings and events, and it was really fun to just be around other kids because there's not that many here at our church, in our congregation. But to see all the hundreds of other kids really helped make me feel like I'm part of a bigger web, and it helped me realize that we have a community and there's people who will always be there for us. And that was my takeaway from GA, so thank you.
Hello. So this year was my first time attending the GA, the UUGA, and I can't speak on how it compared to others, but I will tell you the highlights of this experience. The workshops were incredible. They were informative, inspiring, and gave me a much better perspective of what it means to not only be a UU, but a black UU. There are a lot more of us out there. One of the workshops I attended was Black Power Challenges Liberal Religion, 50 Years Later. And this workshop was a retrospective conversation led by Reverend Dr. Julie Kane and Dr. Mangolizi Sanyika, who was the founding chair of the Black UU Caucus and Black Affairs Council from 1967 to 1973. The workshop highlighted the challenges and outcomes of the Black empowerment movement of the 1960s and its relevance today. I got a lot from that because I had no idea about the history, and it was very informative. Another interesting workshop that I attended was Exploring Intersectional Identity with Personal Storytelling. The focus was to ground us in a sense of ourselves while affirming all the intersectional parts of the individual identity and fully introducing ourselves to each other. And I found that really compelling because we sat down and took all our preconceived notions and learned who we were as individuals and saw the humaneness instead of all of what we thought. Let's see. I was beaming with delight when I saw the workshop entitled Children and Race, The Talk is Too Late, especially after having to have this talk with my son at the age of 5. This workshop addressed the fact that by the age of 4, children have internalized the message, white is better. Yet congregations, caregivers, and parents usually don't talk about racism until their children are much older, if at all. The focus was on what tools adults can use to help children of all colors and counter white supremacy and develop positive racial identities. In another workshop, I learned about the justice campaign Faithify and how it can be used as an opportunity to be fully visible on justice issues in forming partnerships with affected communities. The workshop that stood out to me the most and was an opportunity for action was entitled Not One More, Khalif Browder, White Privilege and Racial Justice. So I'm going to let you watch a quick video on who Khalif Browder was and why this is important to the presenter, art and resistance to education. Yes, that's, so art, I'm going to tell you about art then, okay? So Art and Resistance Through Education is an organization that promotes art as a tool for social justice and making human rights changes through education. So that is Khalif Browder's mural, and it says, "Demand justice." That is the quote that's with it. But I need to let you know who Khalif Browder is, so the video is important.
In May of 2010, 16-year-old Khalif Browder was walking home from a party with a friend when he was stopped by police. An officer said a man had accused them of stealing his backpack.
they came out the police car and they searched us, but we didn't have anything on us. So I was thinking the next step was we're free to go. We're just gonna walk home.
A high school sophomore like millions of others in America with a love for basketball and professional wrestling. Khalif was arrested and charged with robbery.
They set my bail for $3,500. You know, my mom told me she didn't have the money, and it was true. She didn't have the money. $3,500 was a lot for my mom.
He was taken to one of the toughest jails in the country, Rikers Island, where he would spend the next 3 years for a crime he says he didn't commit, without ever going to trial.
The only thing on my mind was I gotta go home. I didn't do this. Now I'm in jail around these grown men, and they're fighting each other, and I don't know. It was like hell on earth. We were beaten. Stomped by the correction officers, hit with weapons. They tackled me in my cell where there wasn't any cameras. They grabbed me up, they put me on the bed, and they were just punching and kicking me. And then they maced me in my eyes, they maced me in my nose and my mouth. I couldn't breathe.
3 years of alleged beatings, gang violence, and over 900 days in solitary confinement, all while he waited for a court date that never came.
It was just, we're not ready for trial. And every single court date, I always had it on my mind, I'm going home this court date. The judge told me if I plead guilty, I would release from jail that same day. But I didn't do it. You're not gonna make me say I did something just so I could go home. If I gotta stay here 5 more months just to prove that I'm innocent, then so be it. It's just heartbreaking, and it's like I felt like they were just playing with my life.
In June of 2013, all charges against Khalif were dropped, and he was released from jail. But by then, he'd missed his junior year in high school, his senior year, proms, graduation.
I lost my childhood. I lost my happiness. I don't really tell too much people about this, but it's like sometimes I talk to myself, and it's like it's actually embarrassing. Sometimes on the train or the bus, I have a whole conversation with myself for 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's like you're really crazy. Like, you really talk to yourself. For being in solitary confinement that long without talking to anybody, I feel like that maybe had something to do with it, because that's where those habits started to pick up. Deep down, I'm a mess, because it's like I'm 21, and in the inside I feel like I'm 40. I always believed in standing up for what I felt was right. And if I would have just been guilty, then my story would have never been heard. Nobody would have took the time to listen to me. I'd have been just another criminal.
So, the horrific psychological effects Khalif Browder suffered over 3 years in jail was far too great. After he committed suicide in 2015 at the age of 22, his mother died last year of what many say was a broken heart. Khalif Browder's story and those like it, those with heinous human rights violation, is the reason ART was founded. An interesting and sad fact is that the U.S. is the only country in the world, besides South Sudan and Somalia, that has not yet ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC, which is the world's foremost international instrument exclusively dedicated to protecting the rights of individuals 18 years and younger. A mural of Khalif Browder was created in the Soho district of New York with the words, "Demand Justice." Art brings attention to human rights violations locally and globally. This workshop inspired me to tell my friends, peers, and the congregation about how we can support young people by educating them about human rights, helping them uphold their own rights and the rights of others. So this program works with the youth to have a greater awareness of human rights, like I said, and after watching that video, I was like, and then you see the mural and it makes you ask questions about who he was, and it makes people want to know the story. So how can we use art in social justice? Some of the ways that were suggested were guerrilla theater, art in your home, art in the congregation, with a focus on who it represents and what it looks like. The ultimate highlight of GA for me was the Ware Lecture, which featured lawyer Brian Stevenson, author of Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption. He's also the director of the Equal Justice Initiative, an organization committed to defending those in poverty, incarcerated, or on death row. Some important points that he shared during his lecture that resonated with me were: the broken understand the power of compassion, change the narrative, and have the uncomfortable conversations. Remain hopeful, and the most important of all was proximity. For me as a person of color, I've at times been frustrated that white people haven't come forth in their ability to decenter themselves and create a society that is truly equal and accessible for all. However, when I left GA, I felt encouraged, hopeful, and fully empowered to follow my conscience as a member of the UU Church. I am grateful for the opportunity I had to learn and connect with other UUs. Our liberation across the country is bound up together, and we must work together to create the world we envision. May it be so.
Aloha, good morning. I'm Allison. Oh, you can see that there. and I was one of the delegates to GA. It was my first General Assembly. 2017, what a smorgasbord that was. A Unitarian feast of racial, economic, environmental, and social justice alongside spiritual practice. As DRUM, which stands for Diverse, Revolutionary, Unitarian Universalist, Multicultural Ministries, stated, this 2017 GA focused on the creation of a Unitarian Universalism without whiteness as its cultural, theological, and institutional center. I picked up a brochure from Beloved Conversations, Meditations on Race and Ethnicity, which opens with this quote by James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Beloved Conversation states, as we are witnessing in our national conversation, one's personal or collective perspective about race matters and shapes the way we see ourselves, each other, and how we interact as faith-filled citizens. It lists 8 things that Unitarian Universalist congregations can do to start the work of dismantling white supremacy. 1, create and fund programs and spaces to nurture the spiritual growth and faith formation of children, youth, and adults of color. 2, train prophetic pastoral caregivers to minister to white fragility and resistance while moving white people toward more resilient and accountable solidarity. 3, create alternative decision-making structures to majority rules democracy, center the voices and experience of people of color. 4, commit human, infrastructural, and financial resources without high barriers for access to community partners and organizations led by and for people of color. 5, recruit, train, and empower leadership by children and people of color in all areas of congregational life, not just in social racial justice areas. 6, institutionalize an explicit commitment to racial justice in church bylaws, end statements, hiring practices, financial policies, and decision-making situations. 7, do theological reflection and political education about the intersections of white supremacy and all other justice and service projects. And 8, provide regular educational and spiritual deepening opportunities for congregants of all races to engage in learning and reflection about white supremacy. And that comes from Ashley Horan. While at GA, I had many conversations with other Unitarian Universalists about how other congregations are addressing the topics of race and ethnicity. And I'm so proud to be able to say that we at First Unitarian Church of Honolulu are one of the Unitarian Universalist congregations that's on the cutting edge of change in our faith. We've already addressed many of the points that were on that list that I just read, including but not limited to a dialogue on race and ethnicity, our monthly Adore group, which is now in its 2nd year, and it has provided regular educational and spiritual deepening opportunities for congregants of all races to engage in learning and reflection about white supremacy. 2, Adore has also helped to train allies to minister to white fragility and resistance while moving white people towards more resilient and accountable solidarity. 3, our Sunday sermon for the teaching on white supremacy, in which we shared our thoughtful reflections and provided political education about the intersections of white supremacy in all areas of life. 4, our adoption of the 8th principle at our annual meeting this year. We are one of the first congregations who voted to adopt the 8th principle, which institutionalized an explicit commitment to racial justice. And 5, last but not least, in November, we will be bringing the Jubilee Anti-Racism Training Program to members of our church and the wider community. The work of dismantling white supremacy with anti-racist programming, coupled with Black Lives of UU, Blue sponsorship, which enabled many UUs of color to attend GA, is indicative of a change in Unitarian Universalism. My lifelong experience of being a UU has been in predominantly white congregations. GA 2017 was an affirmation to me that my beloved community, by voting to convene a working group to develop the 8th principle, is finally facing racial injustice by working to dismantle institutionalized racism. I can't see that because my glasses don't reach that far. Our newly elected UU president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, has just been in Charlottesville along with 100 UUs and hundreds of clergy and faith leaders of other faiths and others resisting white supremacy. I am heartened by the course correction that my church has finally taken. I close with the lyrics from A Change Is Gonna Come, a song by Sam Cooke, no relation to the Hawaiian Cooks. There have been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
We're going to go beyond past 11, so I just beg you to be patient and still have an open heart. Thank you. Okay. Where are the slides? I was trained as a journalist, so I observe a lot. This was my very first General Assembly. I discovered Unitarian Universalism about 8 years ago because of my research on Barack Obama. Curious, I started attending the All Souls Church near me in Washington, D.C., and I also enrolled my daughter at the All Souls Sunday School. And when I came home, because I was raised here in Hawaii, when I came home for Christmas to visit my parents, December 2010, I was stunned to see that this Honolulu church is a predominantly white church. That shocked me because at All Souls in Washington, it's racially integrated. You walk in and there's black and white and mixed race and it's thousands of people with a white gay minister, but it was just what the beloved community should be. That to me was normal. So when I walked in here 7 years ago, I was stunned. But I was here to do research on Obama, so that's why I kept coming back. And 7 years later, it's still the same. And anyway, I know some people have warned me not to say what I'm going to say, but I feel, for fear of offending people, but I think this congregation is strong enough to hear what I want to say or need to say, because we can do better. And that's what I learned at GA. I saw all the other churches on the mainland, which are predominantly white, really consciously making an effort to integrate their churches, especially proximity if they're near a minority community, in most cases a black or Hispanic community. Here in Hawaii, if you show the census, can we have that slide? Okay, Hawaii's population is 26% white. That leaves the majority of people here in Hawaii are not white. And this congregation, I believe, should reflect that non-white, the Asians, the mixed race, the Native Hawaiians, the Polynesians. That's what makes Hawaii, the most perfect place on this planet is the diversity. But it's not reflected in this church, and I don't think it ever has been in its 60 years. And we need to look at that with an honest, open evaluation and discussion. I heard this is the census of Hawaii. See? It's only 26% white. And I remember some people told me from the door, like, oh, we can invite more African Americans to this church. Well, why focus on the 2% African Americans? And I know I was raised here. My dad's black, my mother was Japanese, and I went to, I loved being raised here because in my public school, half the kids were Haole, the other half were local. It was great to be raised that way. But anyway, in the 2% that are black, 1% most of them live on military bases, so they have their own churches, their own chaplains. The other 1% are out in the community, and we have them. I think we need to focus on, in my opinion, the 74% that are local, the Asians, the Polynesians that are out here, okay? And why does this church not attract locals? It's been that way. And these are the excuses I've heard since I've been here. Number one, and the children, our children are racially diverse. Don't worry, in time, when the kids grow up, our church will be diverse too. What, wait another 15 years? But these diverse kids, like Obama, don't remain in UU. At the General Assembly, I found a book, and I opened to the chapter that says UU children are more diverse in the congregation. So this little bit of diversity in our children is not unique to UU in Hawaii. It happens in UU in Nebraska and in Iowa, okay? Number two, Native Hawaiians want more traditional Christian services. They need a lot of God and Jesus. Filipinos are too Catholic. Didn't they used to say that about the Irish and the Italians? Irish Catholic was like the same word, right? And these are stereotypes. Don't they say, and on the mainland they were saying this at GA, don't they say the same stereotypes at the UU churches on the mainland that are predominantly white? Black people want revival, hallelujah, right? Well, the UU churches I attended in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland with racially mixed congregations, the black folks are college professors. Got that? They're highly educated. No matter what your race, if you're highly educated, you're going to reject the traditional religions. So invite Hawaiian college professors. There are not too many at Manoa, but there's plenty at the community colleges. They're smart, and they're on a questioning journey just like you. And then the third excuse I hear all the time is, UU is a predominantly white church on the mainland, and that's why we're a white church here in Hawaii. Well, there are white churches on the mainland who have branches here in Hawaii that are integrated. And these Hawaii churches have been racially diverse for many, many decades. For example, I came up with 6, but in the interest of time, I'll only talk about 3. Harris Methodist Church on South Vineyard Street is where the social justice activists hang out. It's about 80-90% local, about 20% white, and the whites are all those that are politically ambitious. There's a lot of labor union folks and college-educated folks. The former president of the Hawaii Teachers Association is there. It's very Jesus-light. Like, they only mention Jesus like once. After the church, they all go over to Zippy's. These are all local people, mostly Asians, and they talked about working on passing legislation. Like, they passed Nicole, this Chinese girl from Harvard. She was educated at Harvard, and she works for Appleseed now, and she organized and got the earned income tax credit for 4 people, and was passed in the legislature. She did that, okay? And she was using Harris Methodist as her anchor, because they talk about it afterwards at church. So they go to church, but they really plan to make Hawaii a better place. And what their next project is to increase the minimum wage to $15. That's what they're doing at Harris Methodist, and they have monthly meetings, and all the progressive activists go to Harris Methodist because of actually doing things to better Hawaii. Now, also, I went to Church of the Crossroads, which is right below UH. I remember when I was a kid, it was full of radical hippies back in the 60s, radical UH professors. They've calmed down since then, but right now, Church of the Crossroads is about 50% local and 50% white. Social justice, they have a gay flag. They do religion really light like this. They even say that they're inclusive. They have Jews, they have Buddhists. They don't do their language is similar to what we say. And I remember back during the Vietnam War when I was a kid here, Church of the Crossroads gave sanctuary to soldiers who did not want to go to Vietnam. Our Unitarian Church did the same thing. We gave sanctuary, and our minister at the time was Gene Bridges. But Gene was fired by our congregation for giving sanctuary to those soldiers. Gene was white. He was educated at the Harvard Divinity School. His wife was black. Their kids were Hapa. Gene flew to Selma and marched with Martin Luther King in 1965. A few years later, we got rid of him. But anyway, there's all these other churches. And then at the General Assembly, I always introduce myself as coming from the church here in Hawaii. But let me on my notes on Unitarian, the First Unitarian Church of Hawaii, most of us are transplants in this congregation. Whether you've only been in Hawaii for 2 weeks or 20 years, you grew up someplace else, your roots are someplace else other than Hawaii. And most Sundays, there are very few local people here, if any at all. It's about 90% or more white, 2% black when we show up, and there are no locals on Sundays. And the ministers, even our guest ministers are white from the mainland most of the time, and they don't know anything about Hawaii. And when you have speakers here at the pulpit whose frame of reference is the mainland, then you wonder why locals don't want to come here anymore? Except for the closing song, Hawaii Aloha, everything else, the entire sermon, can be from a UU church in Iowa, in my opinion. Week after week of visiting ministers, there's no chance for bonding, no care, no relationship. When you were a kid, did you like your substitute teachers? We've had a couple of years of substitute teachers. How is that working out? And substitute teachers from the mainland who only can teach what they know, the mainland. I think we can do better at integrating this church. They're local people with college degrees, and they've traveled around the world and can appreciate a liberal congregation with a worldview. There's microaggression at this church that I've noticed. One of them that bothers me. Only white people travel. Well, I've been to 70 countries, including Tibet, Nepal, Egypt, Israel, El Salvador, Kenya, and I'm not in the military. My daughter's Girl Scout leaders. Their grandparents were raised on plantations. One is an attorney, the other's a doctor. They're Asians. They escorted the girls to New Zealand, and they've been around the world, okay? So when you invite local people to this congregation, don't have her be the only token at the church. Because they won't come back. I would suggest everyone try to invite a local friend on a particular same Sunday so that there's 10 in the audience, and they can say, oh, there's other people, locals here too, and then they'll want to come back. But there's got to be a plan behind that. And the minister at the pulpit, the sermon, has got to be inclusive and not a mainland lecture. Okay, at the General Assembly, I introduced myself to everybody. Hi, I'm from the same church that we're in Honolulu where Barack Obama attended Sunday school. And, Rosemary, she's the African-American on the left, she exclaimed, I knew it. I knew Obama was one of us. And she kept telling her husband, who was born and raised at UU, that Obama sounds like him. So Rosemary was elated. And one thing about Rosemary, she was a successful writer for the New York Times. And then she became a UU minister, and her church was a congregation in Manhattan. She had diversity. And now she's the president of the Star King, I guess the ministry thing they have in California. She trains future UU ministers, okay? And then in the middle is Susan Frederick Gray, who's our new president, and she knew all about Obama's history in UU, and I was really proud of her, the statement she gave to PBS News last night when she was in Charlottesville. The next photo I have, okay, when Obama, this is another thing, Obama, his grandfather, Stanley Dunham, we should be really proud of the fact, and this is a positive note, that Barack Obama went to Sunday school here, okay? His grandfather, Stanley Dunham, Stan's older brother, his legal name on the birth certificate was Ralph Waldo Emerson Dunham. He was named after the great Unitarian minister and philosopher. Stan enrolled the family, his grandfather enrolled the family in the Unitarian Universalist Church in Seattle. When Obama's mother, Ann, was a teenager in the 1950s, she was active with the UU youth group in Bellevue, Washington. So Barack Obama was raised Unitarian and Universalist in household, and his values come from UU. He was raised in Hawaii, the most racially diverse state in the nation. To Obama, racially integrated communities were normal. His school, his neighborhood, his community in Hawaii. Let's try to make his church racially diverse too. We should put Obama's photograph in the entranceway, I think. Anyway, there's a decision this congregation has to make. to continue to remain a predominantly white church that it's been, or decide to integrate with a local community that makes up almost 75% of the population. I think we need to cut the umbilical cord with the mainland and turn and focus on the rich spirituality and the works of the local people who live here. In order to steal the land and profit, the white missionaries had to demonize and stereotype native Hawaiians as less than human. Hawaiians were brilliant navigators and masters of sustainability in agriculture and fish ponds. No one starved in old Hawaii. The world is focused on sustainability. Did you know Hawaiians trailblazed sustainability 700 years ago? Asian immigrants were stereotyped too, treated like livestock, whipped. Remember the Hanapepe massacre where 50 Asian protesters were shot on the plantation? Asians organized and peacefully ran the white oligarchy out of the legislature in the Democratic Revolution of 1954. We can learn from them. They learned by coming together and working together. Also, you know, things about Hawaii. Hawaii was the first state to legalize abortion in 1970. That came from the local people here, okay? Months ahead of New York. We became the first state to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. You know, the state of Illinois still hasn't passed it. Title IX, giving girls and women access to higher education, that was authored by a local girl, Patsy Mink, okay, from Maui. I mean, the local people here have the will, they've been doing trailblazing things, and we need to invite them to this church. Why are we afraid to invite the local people and integrate this church, okay? Another local person, he lowered the voting age to 18 nationwide. That was Senator Inouye. And he grew up in McCully. Hawaii was the first state to provide near universal health care in 1974, 36 years before the second state, which was liberal Massachusetts. We were more liberal than Massachusetts, and I know UU is headquartered in Boston and they think everything happens there, but Hawaii can hold its own. And did you know that the Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall married a local girl from Maui? A Filipino, Cecilia. They had 2 Hapa kids. Cecilia was Thurgood Marshall's anchor. So there's a lot that we can do. I mean, also for gay rights. Did you know that Hawaii was the first judiciary on the planet to rule in favor of same-sex marriage? First in the planet in 1992. So Paula Cole-Jones, I'll end by saying, said Hawaii is the beloved community. It is out there. We can take the great UU teachings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry Thoreau, Theodore Parker, and blend them with the teachings of Hawaii and become the beloved community as an example for the rest of the nation. We can do this. I suggest we buy 2 tickets for Jubilee and give one to a local friend and move the conversation toward Hawaii. And I think by having more local people, you'll be able to integrate this church with a non-white community and the wisdom experience of local residents and adoring Jubilee. And I think it'll be very powerful if we combine both. Thank you.